Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle. And today I've got a great album spotlight for you guys. This is an album I've been really looking forward to. I've talked about it several times throughout my New Music Friday series as the new singles came out and as the ramp up for the album release was happening. But I finally have been able to hear it, and I'm finally able to give my full thoughts. So this is my album review of the new Star One album, Revel In Time. So Star One, of course, is a project from Arjen Lucassen. He's a prolific singer-songwriter, master multi-instrumentalist. He kind of brings together a whole host of musicians and different singers and brings them together to work on his projects. His main project, especially in the prog world, is Ayreon, where he brings in a whole host of guest musicians, like I was saying, a whole host and a cast of singers to play out these kind of space opera type stories. They're big, sprawling sci-fi concepts, and all the albums kind of link together and tell this kind of big, epic story. And it's right up my wheelhouse. As soon as I discovered this back when I was getting into prog, it was just like marrying these two interests of mine of this kind of fun sci-fi romp, in space and in these different kind of planets and all of this cool exploratory stuff, but then bringing in the progressive rock that I was really loving and really, having these great vocalists from other bands that I knew and him bringing together all these talents. It was just a really exciting thing to discover and really kind of brought the inner nerd in me out and just really got me excited to follow his project and follow along in the storylines, find the little Easter eggs and all of the clues. I've heard people describe his work kind of as the Marvel Cinematic Universe of the prog world, because he has all these interconnected things and brings these singers back, and they are vocalizing different characters now, but you can still hear hints of their past characters, and you can kind of build this kind of metaverse kind of thing with all of his different projects and albums, and it's just kind of a fun thing to do as a geek who likes that kind of stuff. But the Star One project that this album applies to is kind of a side project from that, where he's focusing more on kind of the metal side of the group, whereas Ayreon is more the prog, full-on prog stuff that he does. I feel like this is dialing into a very specific lane of his sound, just trying to do something more metal and more just riff heavy and just not really focused on the grand scheme stories, but focused more on individual stories. So sometimes I view these Star One albums as a little bit of like a collection of short stories, whereas the Ayreon universe are these kind of sprawling novels that interconnect. The Star One universe is kind of this little collection of short stories. And what's interesting about the Star One project is that each song is about a different sci-fi movie or television series, essentially. And so this is the third album, Revel In Time. The first one was Space Metal, which was themed around movies that take place in space, like Star Wars, Star Trek. And then the second one, Victims of the Modern Age, which came out about 10 years after that one, back in 2011. That one was all about post-apocalyptic movies that take place kind of at the end of the world or when things are crumbling in society, as it were. So it's a very dark, heavy album because of the topic and the nature of it. Movies, Blade Runner, I believe, was in there, The Matrix. I want to say Planet of the Apes was even part of it. So, this is right up my lane as a big sci-fi nerd and loving this kind of concept. And it's a fun experience to kind of listen through the album and guess what each song is about, guess what movie the song was based upon. So, and I'm going to kind of spoil some of the movies that are in this album that the songs are based on here. So if you're kind of averse to that, you might want to skip through some of that stuff. But I think it's fair game right now because people who are probably into it have heard the album by now, I'm guessing. But I wanted to give an overview of some of the tracks and some of the movies that inspired them. For this release, Revel In Time, it's all about time travel, which is a fascinating subject that I love to read about, to write about, to kind of think about. It's kind of an interesting concept. And not just time travel, but kind of the manipulation of time in some of these cases. But there's some really iconic stories and movies that are being covered here, and it's been really fun to experience that, to kind of delve into his lyrics and see how he expresses the storylines. and how it's expressed through the music as well. That's definitely a side of this project. So in summary, this album is just a blast. It's so fun to listen to. There's kind of a sense of fun and fancy, like where Ayreon's fun too, and there are these fun concept stories and fun songs, and I like Arjen for that reason, that he's able to infuse so much lightheartedness and fun. He doesn't take himself too seriously, I wouldn't say, but I do believe that there's a little bit more gravity to his Ayreon project, where things are a little bit more serious and story focused. But here, I think it's just about having fun and just taking the concept of the movie, whether it's a crazy kind of comedy movie or something a little bit more down to earth and serious, really taking the theme of that and bringing that into the music. It's kind of a really great skill that Arjen has to really express the themes of these movies through these songs. And sometimes that leads to something darker and heavier. Sometimes that leads to something light and funny, and it all comes out in the music. And so this album, maybe even more so than the other Star One albums, just has a lot of variety and has a lot of fun. It definitely has this kind of unifying heaviness. This is definitely a metal album, so if you don't like your prog very heavy, then this probably isn't for you. But even though there's kind of that overwhelming heaviness and like these chugging riffs and everything that you'd expect from like a hard, heavy metal prog album, there's also some variety in certain tracks that kind of break that up a little bit and make it for a fun kind of breezy experience to get through the album. It doesn't feel like a very long album because it's just fun getting from one song to the next. So that's really, to me, the headline, is that this is a fun album because it's fun not only to hear the different variety in the music and the different fun things that are happening, but it's fun to uncover the different movies that each song covers, especially if you're into sci-fi, and to uncover the different vocalists that are here, or the musicians, which, if you're following kind of the music world and have similar interests and tastes as Arjen Lucassen, you're going to recognize a lot of these singers and a lot of these musicians. And some of them are quite legendary, some of them are kind of new talents. Arjen has that skill to bring together various talent to bolster up the project. He's able to get the best out of these musicians and bring really fun things out of them that you wouldn't hear maybe in their usual project, but come here in a very satisfying, fun way. It's kind of his superpower. If we're talking about Marvel superheroes, that's kind of Arjen's superpower, is to bring together a cast of people and get the best out of them and bring a fun edge and variety to the project. So I really love this album. If it's not apparent by now, I think it's just a blast to listen to. So yeah, this is just a super fun album, and there's so many different tracks that are super fun. The opening track is kind of your standard Star One kind of opening. It brings to mind also like Universal Migrator Part 2 from Ayreon, just this heavy opening that just really gets you in the mood. And this is called Fate of Man. It's based on the Terminator. And it features Brittany Slayes on vocals, and she's definitely incredible on it. A great guitar solo from Michael Romeo as well. Just really fun, heavy, fast-paced opener to get you into the mood and get you started. The next track, 28 Days, is a little bit darker and moodier, a little bit more epic, and has this kind of wall of sound and kind of doomy vibe almost. Russell Allen really takes charge of this on the vocals. He's obviously an incredible singer and very much a big presence in all of these Star One albums. One of my favorite tracks of this whole album is Prescient. I just really adore this. Of course, as the prog lover in me, this is probably one of the most proggy tracks on the album. It features Michael Mills and Ross Jennings, of course, of Haken fame, and is this really intricate sci-fi concept based on the movie Primer, which is a kind of a low budget but very complicated time travel story. And the music really displays this in an expert fashion, because Michael Mills is kind of an expert at vocal arrangements. He's kind of like the Freddie Mercury of our era a little bit. He's really able to bring in great vocal arrangements that really highlight different facets of his voice, and Ross Jennings also kind of does that in some fashion in Haken, so it's a great pairing. They kind of play off of each other, do some like Gentle Giant-ish vocal counterpoint even at some points, and the music is satisfyingly complex behind it as well. So it's just a perfect song that really showcases the movie it's describing, and it's just a really cool, complex prog number that really gives a lot of great focus on the vocalists. Back from the Past, of course, is a straightforward kind of hard rocker with Jeff Scott Soto, featuring lyrics based on Back to the Future. You kind of have to have Back to the Future in the mix if you're doing a time travel album, I would say. Revel in Time, the title track, is just a fun romp, really catchy, kind of bouncy, fun metal track based on Bill and Ted, which means it's a little bit more light and lighthearted because of the movie that it's based upon is more of a comedy, so I think that's really reflected in the song and the style. The Year 41 is really a standout track, I think. It's really heavy, but interesting instrumentation in the back to kind of give it its variety and difference from the other tracks. There's kind of this acoustic guitar kind of melody that plays alongside the heavier riffs that kind of provide a lot of good variety, but it has this really heavy kind of sludgy sound in parts, and it's just a really good track that features a lot of legendary people on it as well. Joe Lynn Turner is the lead vocalist here. Bridge of Life is another great track. That's what's fun about this album. Just from track to track, it's fun the whole ride through. And Bridge of Life features Damian Wilson on vocals, who's of course another standout in the Arjen Multiverse, who's been featured on a lot of the projects, of course on previous Star One albums as well. And has some really interesting synth work and really kind of great expressive vocals. I love Damian's voice. He's one of the best out there, so this is a great track that's well placed amongst kind of these heavier track that preceded it. Today is Yesterday is a really fun track. It's based on Groundhog Day, so it has another kind of comedic element maybe, but how it's done is really fascinating because it's really heavy, has these heavy kind of thrashing riffs, and then that drops out for this kind of interesting, kind of almost classical flavor to keyboard, leading to a very strange vocal effect that's really humorous and funny. It's a deep, dark vocal from Dan Swano. Poor Billy, he keeps saying that over and over, and it's really an interesting effect that brings kind of an air of comedy and interesting darkness to this kind of what you'd expect to be more of a funny story, but that kind of is what brings the humor, is that it's this kind of dichotomy of the lyrics versus the darkness of the vocals, and there's just a lot of cool effects that I think bring a lot of fun to this. Of course, A Hand on the Clock is a great vocal showcase for Floor Jansen, who you have to have on an album like this. She's been involved in pretty much almost all of Ayreon stuff and the other Star One albums. She's a staple to the group. Of course, the current lead singer of Nightwish, and she's incredible. And this track is a lot of fun with some, I like kind of the effects on the guitars and keyboards, kind of leading into this like time wonkiness, because there's a lot of bends and things in the music and in the notes to kind of give you that effect that something's a little off and the timiness is a little strange. Beyond the Edge of It All is kind of just a straightforward, really good classic Star One track. Great singing, great old school kind of metal vibes to it. And then it ends with one of the standout tracks, Lost Children of the Universe, which is kind of almost an epic track. Has a lot of proggy kind of influences to it. It's epic, it builds, has this really great kind of organ and expressive vocals to start, something like Deep Purple's Child in Time, before there's choir brought in to kind of bring up the sound and the epicness of the track. And then this all culminates in this really excellent Steve Vai guitar solo, just sublime and a perfect track to end the album on, based on the movie Interstellar, which is a favorite of mine also, and has great themes and sounds from it. And I love just the lyrics and the whole vibe of the track. So incredible work. Arjen is kind of back on top here. I think he's doing an incredible job. This album, it's not meant to be the serious Ayreon album. It's not meant to be this kind of epic storyline. It's more meant to be lighthearted and fun and take you on a journey through all these different movies and experiences, and I think it succeeds in that in a big way, and I really enjoyed that aspect. I thought the previous Ayreon album was a little bit disappointing, and I know even Arjen has spoken in interviews that he got kind of a negative response about it, and it was kind of disappointing to him, the response of it. And so this is kind of a direct reaction, where that album, Transitus, was kind of a big sprawling rock opera and more of like a musical style, kind of different than a lot of the other Ayreon albums. It kind of is its own separate story, and I think it had different ambitions than to be an Ayreon album at first, which was maybe why it didn't quite fit the mold quite as well. But I think this was kind of a reaction to that, like, okay, people had mixed feelings about Transitus, So let's bring something that's classic Arjen Lucassen, that's just him at his core, just doing something fun and heavy and just having a blast with it. And I think that's what happened. So this is a fun album. I recommend it highly to all, especially those who like the Arjen Lucassen metaverse that I've been talking about and who are fans of Ayreon and all of these things. Or if you're just a fan of prog metal in general or sci-fi movies, you know, it's just a fun experience to guess the movies, even though I kind of spoiled it through my review here. But it's just a fun experience to hear the lyrics and try to uncover what they're talking about and how that matches up to the movies that the songs are supposed to be about. So thank you guys so much for joining me here. Hopefully you enjoyed this review and my thoughts about it. It's been a lot of fun listening to this, and I plan to listen a lot more. My vinyl copy is hopefully coming probably in a couple months, because I ordered it at the same time as vinyl versions of Space Metal and Victims of the Modern Age, and apparently they're all going to be packaged together, and those albums come out a bit later. I think the latest one is out in April, so I'm gonna have to wait a couple months to get the actual physical version and copy. But in the meantime, I'm gonna be listening and enjoying it and excitedly awaiting the big master package, because that's another great thing about Arjen, is he always makes these products really worthwhile, because the artwork is incredible, the whole packaging is great, and he gives a lot of like great insights and extras and booklets and things that really bring out the fun and all of the work that went into this. So great work to Arjen Lucassen. I think this is incredible work, great fun, and hope you guys check it out. If you guys like what I'm doing here, please subscribe. If you like these album reviews, I do them fairly regularly. I try to put out some kind of album review of a sort about weekly. And I plan to also do a new music shuffle, where I'm going to do a catch-up of several albums that came out in the last couple months and talk about some of my favorites. So that should be a fun show for you prog fans. So if you love prog music like I do and are always interested to discover new prog music, this is the place for you, I hope. That's what I'm trying to cultivate here. So thank you guys so much. Please give comments about how you felt about the album, if you thought this was fun, if you're excited to check it out if you haven't yet. And I just hope you guys are out there enjoying the music. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll hopefully see you in another episode. Bye.